To understand Derinkuyu, you must understand the landscape that made it possible. Cappadocia sits on the central Anatolian plateau, a high, dry tableland surrounded by volcanic peaks. Millions of years ago, eruptions from Mount Ursis and Mount Hassan blanketed the region in thick layers of volcanic ash. Over time, the ash compressed into a rock called tuff, soft enough to carve with hand tools, hard enough to hold its shape once carved, and remarkably good at maintaining a constant temperature. The people of this region discovered very early that they could carve into the rock. The fairy chimneys, the strange, pillar-shaped formations that make Cappadocia famous today, are natural erosion features, but humans quickly adapted them. Rooms were hollowed out inside the chimneys. Churches were carved into cliff faces. Entire villages were excavated from the soft stone. But the underground cities are something different. They are not homes carved into rock faces. They are engineered complexes, deliberately hidden beneath flat ground, with no visible entrance from the surface. They were not built for daily life. They were built for survival. No one knows exactly when Derinkuyu was first excavated. The most common attribution is to the Phrygians, the people who dominated central Anatolia from roughly 1200 to 700 BC, after the collapse of the Hittite Empire. Phrygian pottery has been found in the upper levels. The xenon, the Greek word for a guest room, used by archaeologists to describe the larger chambers, is consistent with Phrygian architectural practices. But it is equally possible that the earliest tunnels are older. The Hittites, who controlled this region for centuries before the Phrygians, were accomplished builders in stone. Some scholars have suggested that the first levels were excavated as grain stores or refuge shelters as early as 1500 BC. What is certain is that the city was expanded over many centuries, by many different peoples, each generation digging deeper and adding to what the previous generation had left behind. The Phrygians began it. The Persians may have used it. The early Christians certainly expanded it. The Byzantines fortified it. Each layer of history left its mark in the soft tuff. The most striking feature of Derinkuyu is its defensive design. The city was not merely underground, it was built to be sealed. At every level, the connecting tunnels could be blocked by enormous circular stones, rolling doors carved from the same tuff, each weighing between 200 and 500 kilograms. These stones were kept inside the tunnels, recessed into carved niches. When danger came, they could be rolled across the passage, blocking it completely. The stones could only be moved from the inside. An attacker who reached the entrance would find himself facing a stone wall with no mechanism to open it. The tunnels themselves were designed to be indefensible from outside. The passages between levels are narrow, barely wide enough for one person to pass, and low, forcing anyone entering to crouch. A single defender with a spear could hold such a passage indefinitely. The staircases turn at sharp angles, preventing a rush of attackers. Ventilation shafts, while necessary for air, were too narrow for a human body to pass through. The entire complex was, in effect, a fortress turned inside out. Instead of walls rising above the ground, its defenses went down into it. The engineering of the ventilation system is remarkable. Derinkuyu has approximately 52 ventilation shafts, the deepest of which extends more than 85 meters from the surface to the lowest level. These shafts served a triple purpose: they provided fresh air, they regulated temperature, and, crucially, they gave access to groundwater. The deepest shafts reached the water table. Wells were carved at the bottom, providing a water supply that could not be cut off from the surface. This was essential. An underground city without water is simply a tomb. The builders of Derinkuyu ensured that even if an enemy controlled the surface entirely, poisoning or blocking surface wells, the people below could survive. The temperature underground remains constant at roughly 13 to 15 degrees Celsius, year-round. In a region where summer temperatures can exceed 40 degrees and winters drop well below freezing, this stability was itself a form of wealth. Food stored underground lasted longer. Wine fermented more predictably. Livestock, yes, livestock were brought underground, suffered less from the extremes. The most extensive expansion of Derinkuyu came during the early Christian period, from roughly the 2nd to the 7th century AD. Cappadocia was one of the earliest regions to adopt Christianity. St. Paul passed through on his missionary journeys. The Cappadocian fathers, Basil of Caesarea, Gregory of Nazianzus, Gregory of Nyssa, were among the most influential theologians of the 4th century. Monasticism flourished in the carved-out churches and hermitages of the region. But Christianity in this period was frequently persecuted. First by the Romans, then by successive waves of Arab raiders after the Islamic conquests of the 7th century. The underground cities became places of refuge. Entire communities, men, women, children, animals, provisions, could descend into the rock and wait out a raid that might last days or weeks. Churches were carved on the lower levels, with barrel-vaulted ceilings and simple stone altars. Meeting rooms large enough for several hundred people have been found. Schools, identified by the benches carved into the walls, appear on the 2nd and 3rd levels, close enough to the surface for natural light to filter down through the ventilation shafts during the day. Daily life underground was not comfortable, but it was organized. The upper levels, the first 3 or 4, served as living quarters and communal spaces. Kitchens have been identified by their blackened ceilings and the placement of smoke channels. Wine presses appear on the 3rd and 4th levels, flat basins carved into the floor where grapes were crushed by foot, with channels leading to collection vats below. Oil presses worked on a similar principle. Grain stores were carved as deep, cylindrical pits with stone lids. Stables for horses, cattle, and goats have been found on the 1st and 2nd levels, close to the surface for ventilation. The animals were essential, not just for food, but for their warmth. In the cool underground chambers, the body heat of livestock would have raised the temperature noticeably. The deeper levels, below the 7th or 8th, appear to have been reserved for storage, for water access, and for last resort refuge. If the upper levels were breached, the population could retreat downward, sealing each level behind them with the rolling stone doors. Derinkuyu is not alone. More than 200 underground cities have been identified in Cappadocia, though most are much smaller. The nearest large one, Cappadocian, is roughly 9 kilometers away, and a tunnel, not yet fully explored, is believed to connect the two. If confirmed, this would mean that 2 cities, each capable of sheltering thousands, were linked beneath the earth over a distance of nearly 10 kilometers. The tunnels between cities served both as escape routes and as communication lines. If one city was besieged, its inhabitants could flee to another without ever surfacing. The network suggests a level of coordination and collective planning that goes far beyond a single community digging for its own survival. Think of it. An entire civilization, duplicated underground. Not as a monument, not as a temple, not as a palace, but as a place to hide. A civilization whose greatest engineering achievement was the ability to disappear. Who were the people who lived here? Not permanently, the cities were not designed for permanent habitation. They were refuges, used when raiders appeared on the horizon. A signal, a fire on a hilltop, a horn blown from a watchtower, and the population would gather their animals, their grain, their children, and descend. Days would pass. Sometimes weeks. Above them, on the surface, invaders would find empty villages. Houses standing open. Fields untended. No people. The landscape itself had swallowed them. Eventually the raiders would move on. The stone doors would be rolled back. The families would climb up into the light, blinking, and resume their lives as if nothing had happened. The fields would be replanted. The animals would graze again. And the underground city would wait, patient, for the next time it was needed. The cities were used well into the Ottoman period. Christian communities in Cappadocia, the Greek-speaking Karamanlides, continued to use Derinkuyu as a refuge as late as the 19th century. When the population exchange between Greece and Turkey was carried out in 1923, the Greek Christians of Cappadocia were expelled, and much of the knowledge of the underground cities went with them. The tunnels filled with rubble. Entrances were forgotten or deliberately sealed. The town of Derinkuyu was built over the top, its residents using some of the upper chambers as cellars but largely unaware of the scale of what lay beneath. Until that day in 1963, when a man knocked through a wall and found a world. Today, Derinkuyu is open to tourists, though only 8 of its 18 known levels are accessible. The deeper levels remain partially excavated, partially flooded, full of rubble and unanswered questions. How many people actually sheltered here at any one time? How long was the longest continuous occupation? Were there births underground? Deaths? Were the dead buried in the rock, or carried up to the surface? We do not know. The tuff preserves architecture beautifully, but it does not preserve paper, wood, or cloth. There are no inscriptions on the walls, no graffiti, no records. The city is mute. It tells us everything about how its builders thought, about defense, about ventilation, about water, about the geometry of survival, but nothing about what they felt. There is something profoundly restful about the idea of Derinkuyu. Not the fear that drove people underground, that is not restful at all. But the city itself. The constant temperature. The silence. The soft volcanic stone, smooth to the touch. The knowledge that above you, no matter what was happening, armies, earthquakes, empires, you were below it all. Hidden. Safe. Still. The ventilation shafts bring air from the surface. If you stand at the bottom of one and look up, you can see a tiny circle of sky, impossibly far above. The light that reaches you is faint, filtered, gentle. The sounds of the world do not penetrate. There is only the rock, the air, the silence. 20,000 people could shelter here. And the earth would hold them, the way the earth has always held us, quietly, patiently, without complaint. If you've enjoyed this story, you can subscribe. More like this, next week. Sleep well.